the subject that we're talking about today is kind of the big subject of privileges, rights, and luck. We all are born with certain privileges, advantages. We believe we're entitled to certain rights, and we are lucky to have some of those things. This is a very popular topic when it goes to the area of privilege by race, as it's called, white privilege. But that is not necessarily what I'm interested in talking about. However, if we do go there, that is great with me. We can go anywhere. But I'd love to start with just a brief introduction of your name. If you could say how old you are, that would be interesting as well. And if you could talk about some of the advantages you feel you have, either you were born with them or you earned them. I would just be intrigued as an entry point to discussion to know those things. So does anyone feel like starting?
I can go first.
Okay,
I'm
thanks.
Grace. I'm 20 years old, and I'm trying to think of some advantages. I've worked really hard for my education, and so that's one of the advantages that I think I've had. I've worked really hard in subjects that I was previously lacking in to become proficient and good with them. For example, math. I used to really struggle with math, and I put in a lot of work, and now it's one of my advantages. And my education is something that's been an advantage, even though getting an education and obtaining it has been really difficult for me and my family in certain aspects financially. But there's been sacrifices that have been made for me to be able to have that advantage. And so that's one of my strongest suits.
It's a great intro. Thanks, Grace.
Mhm.
Ethan?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm 28. And when I think about advantages that I've had, I think the number one is, in a fairly similar way, education, and particularly, I guess, the way that I was raised from a very young age to value knowing things deeply or learning about things or being curious about them and thinking carefully, and being raised in a house with, I guess, a lot of books. But I think the number one thing that is maybe different and an advantage that I had over even people who lived similar lives was, I think, a specific thing that my dad in particular instilled, which was that there's no magic that happens when you learn something difficult. Like, I grew up with him writing like all these Greek letters, doing math on his like pads. We'd go to the beach and he'd be like working on his stuff. And it always seemed so unattainable to me when I was like 10. I was like, I'm doing multiplication. Like, how do you possibly get to the point where you're writing these like letters? But he was just very insistent that it really was just one step at a time. And that every step was as doable as the next. It's just that, and his view is probably different than mine, but I think his view would be that most people just give up at a certain point or think, oh, that's not something I'm capable of. And I think that was very important in enabling me to learn and become smarter, was having it kind of drilled in that it's like not about your brain or your genetics, but about your willingness to keep going and to treat each bite of learning as something that you can choose to do. And I think that's like, when I got to college, I just noticed how much that was helping me and how much other people had not received that idea.
Wow. I feel like that helps me to know you better very quickly. So thank you for that. I'm going to have questions and thoughts on each of the things you guys said, but first I'll do my introduction. So I'm Evan, I'm 40. And I feel like I was born with a number of advantages. I often think about the fact that being tall has been great in my life. Like, people seem to respect people who are tall just automatically. I don't know if it's like a primal kind of thing that, maybe the person is towering or is strong, or I don't know. But and there's various other just like kind of physical things. But I had the advantage of being born, relatively intelligent. But I'd say something that happened to me that I didn't ask for that has been one of my main advantages, and also it has a negative side too, is my ability to think independently and kind of start by doubting the veracity of a statement when I hear it. So I have like a light bulb that goes off when I hear orthodoxy, essentially somebody saying, well, they say. It's like, well, who's they? And what does that mean? Or you're supposed to, or something like that. Then I always begin questioning. Doesn't mean I'm going to disagree with it, but I always say, who benefited from that? How many people actually agree? How many people have ever thought about it? So I've ended up a very independent thinker. And like I say, there's been some issues with that, which is that it can be alienating, but it's been very helpful to me in business because, for instance, I started a marketing company that's been successful, and that's because I was able to reverse engineer Google search algorithm. And I'm not good at math or anything like that. I've just thought in a very simple way about it, and not too many other people did that. I just tested and worked hard, and good things came from it because I didn't listen to what everybody else said. This is how it works, and I just doubted it and moved forward from that. So it's been advantageous in that way, but it's often alienating. So that's something I can get into if it comes up. So yeah, from here, we can just talk about anything we heard that is of interest related to this idea of, I'm curious, the things that you guys were born with. I'm hearing from both of you, you were born with intelligence, and Grace, you were born with a drive to work hard.
Yeah, I don't know if I was necessarily born intelligent.
Oh, okay.
There's definitely things I excelled in as a child, such as reading and vocabulary and things like that. But when it came to math and formatting things and stuff like that, it was really hard for me. And so I had to get out of the mindset of I can't do this and I'm dumb because I don't understand how to do basic math, and really work hard to be at the point where I am today. And it was my mom and I actually were just talking about this. I'm about to graduate with a degree in accounting. I'm looking into some computer science. And I never thought that that would be the kind of career path I would go because I was so insecure about my ability in math and, things with technology and numbers and everything. But it was just me constantly getting frustrated that I couldn't do it. And once I figured out how numbers made sense to me, I was able to open an entire world. But there's definitely some advantages I was born with and some that I worked very hard to achieve.
I heard something that Ethan said that I felt like wasn't mentioned as much, or it isn't properly acknowledged, which is that you can work hard and take it bite by bite, but you need to have the organic intelligence to even do that. And I agree, Ethan, with the notion that many people have the ability to do that if they were not intimidated by looking at the end product of that work or intelligence, which is like knowing the Greek symbols or whatever it is. But some people don't have the organic intelligence to get there. It would just constantly be frustrating for them. So I feel like that is worth acknowledging. Do you guys acknowledge that or agree with it?
It's something I don't think about because it's uncomfortable to think about. I'd rather chalk up my ability to, actually, Grace, I studied computer science for 2 years in college before bailing and switching paths. But I actually had, in my own way, a similar experience of like in 10th grade, or like before 10th grade, I was kind of not bad at math, but kind of struggling to be like, it took a lot of effort and I put a lot of deliberate effort into it and became good at it. And I mean, the answer to your question is, Evan, I don't know, and I prefer not to think about it because I don't like to think of myself as different from other people because of what's, in my skull. You know what I mean?
I have a good thought to what you're asking, Evan. To me, everyone has their own strengths, and what maybe your organic intelligence isn't necessarily geared towards math or educational kinds of things, but maybe you're really good at art and that's where your strong suit is. I don't think everybody has the same intelligence that can be used for the same things. I think everyone can try, but that doesn't, I mean, I definitely think that, you kind of do need certain blocks in order to build up that structure of being able to do a certain skill. And just because you lack the blocks in that certain realm doesn't mean that the person is any less valuable. It just means that maybe their skills are somewhere else.
Yes, I don't. I wouldn't make a judgment on someone's value, certainly, but
Yeah.
but I guess when I talk about organic intelligence, I'm probably talking about like the ability to put together theoretical concepts, something similar to IQ, which seems to be like reasonably repeatable. I don't know that it certainly shouldn't be a defining thing for a person, but well, I think it's interesting. I mean, what I'm hearing from Ethan is what I perceive as part of your ideology, or kind of the unconscious, culturally assimilated beliefs that you have, that you shouldn't think too hard about inequalities between people because perhaps it's uncompassionate. I don't want to fill in the blank there incorrectly.
Yeah, I would say it's less of a cultural thing than a personal, like, and it's less unconscious than conscious. It's like, it's because I don't know, I guess I figure my life is probably better if I treat everybody as and maybe you disagree, maybe this isn't true, but I kind of figure my life is better if I don't go around thinking of myself in terms of like my like genetic makeup and like, oh, my organic brain, but rather think of myself as just like a psychological like person. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not like hardwired to be smarter or something, and isn't necessarily, but just I just have chosen, I do one thing and other people do other things. I guess I figure my life is better that way, rather than kind of comparing myself.
I
Maybe it's not.
I like what you're saying from like a human standpoint, but I feel like I want to challenge you on that because, um, in certain, I mean, how can you properly evaluate people, let's say, in a context where you're an authority over them? Let's say you're in a work context or something. If you're not being fully honest about the full package or the complexity of the human being before you. I mean, certainly in a work context where you need productivity, it feels valuable to say, okay, this person may not have as high of an IQ, but they're phenomenally charismatic and people want to follow them or something like that. So I feel like it's useful for that, but I also am generally a fan of seeking out as much truth about the person that you're talking to and yourself as possible. But I think it becomes problematic if it's accompanied by a feeling that you're better or something because you either have a natural advantage or an earned advantage over others. I think I generally go through life feeling pretty vulnerable and that I'm no better than anyone, and I can, kind of fall flat just as easily as anybody who has, fewer advantages than I do. But it helps me to keep in mind those uncomfortable truths because somehow I can navigate the world a little bit better if I acknowledge them. And that one isn't particularly important to me, but I picked up on it because it seems to have, it seems to be a thread that's connected to a root that's something very important about you.